And once again, I would like to say greetings to each and every one of you, Aquaba, and welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Rasta Report here on LIB Radio, LIB livinginblack.com. My name is Kidi Owado, aka the Conscious Rasta. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We commence from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Wednesday. It is the 25th day of February, year 2025, 2026 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we've realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, livinginblack.com. What a joy, what a joy, what a joy it is to be with you today on your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are livinginblack.com. And I am with you live and direct and in your face with the Conscious Rasta Report. Let me turn my camera on to me so you can see my lovely face this morning. I just got all groomed up real nice just for you. You know we appreciate, love you around here on your LIB Radio Network. What a joy it is to be with you. I want to thank you all, first of all. I want to thank you all for being responsive to everything that I am doing right now. I did at the beginning of February, we're going into this extensive listing of my books all month long. And you are responding. I'm seeing the highest level of book sales on Amazon that I've seen since December 2023. And we still have another 5 days to finish this month. I think we're going to set not a record there, but we're going to do so much better than we have been doing over recent years. And I'm grateful to you, our listening audience. You know who you are. And I want to thank you all for being here. For Africa One, I see you checking in bright and early on the program. And I bet you she's already hit the like button as well. You are a champion, my beloved. I got your message today. And I did go to the website, and I realized that website was actually, I'm subscribed to that website, and it is a wonderful website. The sister who does the broadcast right now, I can't think of her name, but she is really smart. And I agree with you that she and I need to have a conversation together. So that's very, very good. Let me give people the name of that website because you did send it to me. Okay. And the website was Panagenius TV. It is wonderful. Panagenius TV. She is awesome. It is wonderful. And you have sent me the application or the application form. I don't have any other contact. I've emailed you one of her Substack essays, maybe a more informal way of contacting her. That is perfect. Substack would be a great way for me to get in contact with our sister. Let's go into today's program. On today's Conscious Rasta Report, with two new books. Not new. These are actually a little bit older. Oh. I have one new book to show you today. Let me put it up on the cover. Awakening the Crown. This book is all pictures. It's all graphics. Every page of it. And it is actually very well done. And it is loaded with information. So I've never done a book like this. You see just pictures, page after page. It's 125 pages of pictures on every aspect of personal empowerment. It reminds us somewhat of the book, The Conscious Roots. But this is all pictures. I intended for this one to be taken to young people, but at the same time, by the time I finished it, I realized, well, this is my program for living, and I'm doing the best I can to give to the younger generations what they need to move forward. And there was a question that was asked, what do we do at this point in Panagenius City? You were just watching it if you were tuned in on our You Now family or our Tune In app. You were listening to it. But there was a question, where do we go from here? What steps do we take? And that's the critical question. Sister asks the right questions at the right time, as well as she leads you forward in the conversation. Panagenius TV is very well named. Today, I'm showing off my new book, Awakening the Roots, Designing Your Body from the Cells Up for Power, Clarity, and Youthful Aging. Awakening the Crown, designing your body from the ground up. And there is our young couple. They are reaching for their crown, awakening the crown. This is an awesome, awesome book. And I thank you all for being a part of what I do. First up for today, we're going to take a look at this book. This book is entitled Paradigm Shift, the next empowering pathway for Afri-Amer development. And when we look at the world has been forced into a massive disruption of normality because of the pandemic. This chaos is caused by enormous societal fear, anxiety, and panic, largely due to the ongoing pandemic. When I talk about this sense of urgency, I am not engaging in hyperbole or perpetuating inconsequential criticism of these times. We now exist within a state of emergency, the state of which was largely undeclared. For Africans living anywhere in the world, every aspect of our group's survival is essentially challenged. I have been documenting these existential threats for over 3 decades through the series of Conscious Rasta Reports and my published books. And you've been through those now. We are up to the 35th in this series. That's today. This is the 35th in the series. And this is actually 41 books had come before this, so they're a little out of sequence. Some of the earliest books I didn't cover because those are out of print. Still, these problems keep getting worse. Our failure to address these challenges is proving to be a fatal flaw. We are at a critical crossroads. Is it too late for us to save ourselves from an unimaginable fate? Paradigm shift, the next empowering pathway for Afri-Amer development. This is book, we're going to go through it real fast, but this book should not be ignored because, to the best of my abilities, this was a definitive blueprint for Afri-Amers as well as Africans in Britain, Africans in France, Africans in Canada, Africans across the CARICOM regions, Africans in Central and South America, Pan-African development across our mother continent. It was this actually the acronym, the next empowering pathway for Afri-Amer development, was actually taken from NEPAD, the new economic program for African development. And I'm going to mention that in the book, NEPAD, plus I'll mention another of other continental programs. I began this book with this quote from Martin L. King. First, I have a photograph here, and the photograph, caption of the photograph, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. But Martin Luther King says this, I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have. And I know we will win. But I come to believe that I am integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision she may have had. And I'm afraid that even as we integrate, We are walking into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to be deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetrate the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, praise be his eternal name. And as they took him out, took him down, 10,000 of us stood up and we all said, I am Martin Luther King. Let's go into the book. The first, as you know, I begin each chapter with a quote. I think this quote is very inspiring. Chapter 1 is called Crossfade to Black Resistance. Resilience. Crossfade to Black Resistance. The book before this one, 14 months before this one comes out, is the book Fade to Black. I was depressed after publishing that book, Fade to Black. It was an excellent book. The research in the book was outstanding. But unfortunately, that book pointed to the fact that we were fading to black. So I began with a quote from Marcus Garvey. You, at this time, can only be destroyed by yourselves, from within and not from without. You have reached the point where the victory is to be won from within and can only be lost from within. Marcus Garvey, from selected speeches and writings of Marcus Garvey, an imperative to action. In the late summer of 2000, I published my 38th original book, Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race. The many social, economic, and global health disruptions during the year are unprecedented in modern history. The world's population near entirety was forced into monumental changes of normalcy, largely due to a massive disruption of society, an overriding sense of urgency, both consequences of the fear and panic caused by the COVID-19 driven propaganda. I am alerted to and motivated to research the, quote, novel coronavirus outbreak as early as February 3rd, 2020. I should say. I brought to this investigation a deep skepticism of medical science claims made by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Epidemic Intelligence Service, the CIA of the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, and many media affiliates. I have written extensively since the early 1990s about these U.S. government agencies exposing their many machinations and that negatively impact health care for the nation's citizens. These agencies have long records for us to examine, ranging from federal government's role in the Tuskegee syphilis study to as recent as suppressing peer-reviewed scientific dissent. Peer-reviewed scientific dissent. Where am I? Let me just jump in. So, I've written many volumes of references regarding research regarding this legacy, toward the aim of sharing a much deeper comprehension of what this pandemic reflected. Contrary to most media and government prognostications on a COVID-19 future, during the year I amassed 311 files as references, most of them peer-reviewed literature from scientific journals. By mid-year, I was ready to publish my findings. It was an amazing year of focus and writing for me, releasing 2 science-based books in May 2020, The Black is Soil, Africa Can Feed the World, and 2, Panic, What the Coronavirus Pandemic Tells Us About the State of the World. I am immensely proud of such a literary accomplishment. One second, let me wet my whistle. I slurped. And I did put my tea bags in today's tea. Yesterday I was over here sipping on my morning tea that had no tea in it. The new book represents a strategic program to rapidly transform this new book have rapidly transformed the destiny for the people of American ancestry living in the U.S., in the UK, and other diaspora environments. It focuses on locations where our numerical minority status puts us in jeopardy of demographic crises and the possibility of collapse for our ethnic communities. Paradigm Shift is largely constructed from excerpts from many of my previous publications. This book is intended to compel an extremely high sense of urgency to the reader, an extremely high sense of urgency to you, the reader. I presume that readers of The Next Empowering Pathway for Afri-Amer Development have experience with at least one of these books and consequently are quite familiar with my research and writing style. For the many who have never read my books, although conceptually this new one is quite challenging, it can bring you to a reasonable understanding of the nature of my 3 decades of published scholarship, perhaps inspiring you to read further from my catalog. When I talk about this sense of urgency, I am not engaging in hyperbole or perpetuating inconsequential criticism of our group, the society, or these times. I intend to convey the truly historic nature of this moment in 21st century contemporary history. We now exist within a state of emergency, of which there have been so many warnings in the past, which has largely been undeclared. For Africans living anywhere in the world, every aspect of our group's survival is being challenged essentially. I have been documenting these existential threats for over 3 decades within this series of Conscious Rasta Reports. Fade to Black brought us to a critical point of understanding the dimensions of this collapse. It featured, I skipped a little bit, we're here. It featured a massive amount of data and analysis that confirmed our worst predictions. I was quite pessimistic to the point of near depression after completing this volume. It didn't help my mental state that the vast population to which the dire warning was directed acted as if the book and the terrible fate that it documented didn't exist. This has been a terrible personal blow to realize the large-scale rejection of my work as the most prolific published Black scientific futurist in the world. Still, there are some basic concepts from that and others of my books that I must emphasize that my readers comprehend, appreciating the body of published work that I have worked so hard to create. Some of the most fundamental, important of these foundational comprehensions include, but are definitely not limited to, point. As a social, ethnic, or racial group, we, Africans, born anywhere in the world, have an absolute right to exist as a group. Point. As individuals within the larger body, members of this group have an obligation to do what is within our capabilities to assure that our race survives and thrives. Point 3. The long historical record unquestionably demonstrates that our group of global African descended people has had to struggle, often violently, to protect our group from ruthless exploitation, toxic racism, robbery, and crimes against humanity, including genocide. And I did talk about this. As I said, this book is largely comprised of assembling pieces from my other books. So we did talk about this list recently. And the record of anti-African actions is unbroken for nearly 3,000 years, when savage hordes from Western Asia and Europe invaded the African continent and brutalized our ancestral territories because of our wealth, as well as our racial, ethnic, and national identities. Here's a couple more points. These collectives of criminal manipulators have targeted our group for policies to restrict our procreation, destabilize the family as a basic survival unit, acted aggressively to rob us of our natural wealth, invaded the mind spaces of our generations, murdered our leaders, and created separate healthcare policies that negatively impact our group. Quote, next point, these hidden persuaders use mass media and systematic social engineering intended to infect the subconscious minds of our community members. Their goal is to implant ideas and values by which we will continue to destroy our group's self-interest and basic survivability. Trends analysis and scientifically based futurism provide extensive tools that we can forecast that if Africans in America, who are most often choose to refer to as Afri-Americans, do not make the needed adjustments to alter the trajectory, this will lead to a catastrophic collapse of our status. I have frequently forecast that this complete downfall will have been finished by about 45 years from now. And that now is now 43 years. It's 2 years since this book came out. I've shared a partial list, a small part of the whole, which confirm the existential crisis that Afri-Americans find themselves confronting today. The U.S. is moving from a wealthy imperial power into a new status as a problem-ridden, dystopian, and declining empire with a rising at-home fascist state of societal affairs. This was the warning. It went out. No one heeded it. Let me see if anybody's in my audience for today. I do see not much of an audience, but we do encourage you, wherever you are, whoever you are, do hit the like button. Man, I'm asking everybody, please tell your friends to tell their friends. Paradigm shift, what to do. These are a series of steps that could constitute a rapid, positive transformation of our circumstance. You must first and foremost buy time for a much wider program of resilience. The following actions can all make a big difference to the group's fate. I'm just going to share. This is a long list. It's got, man, this list goes on and on. This list is very long. It's got 36 items on the list. I'm not going to be able to read 36 items, but I am going to share the first 3 and the last 3. Number 1, convene an extensive series of community and virtual town hall meetings to organize collaborative structures, identify resources, set priorities, and coordinate activity across many different operations. The modern convenience of electronic communications further facilitates our ability to develop consensus. We must begin talking at incrementally increasing levels of engagement. Number 2, consolidate our efforts to prioritize reparations with an escalating communications initiative. At every level, we seize each opportunity to remind our audience that reparations represents an uncompromising position. Our persistence will overcome resistance from within and without. Point 3, build cooperative networks involving A, grassroots organizers, B, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, C, public sector agencies and elected officials, D, private sector businesses and foundations, D, that was D, E, HBCUs, other colleges and universities and their alumni, and F, those would be 6, Black-owned and trustworthy Black-owned media, and as well as other media. But we really must rely upon ourselves. We cannot rely on anyone else. That was 1 through 3 of 36. Let me give you 33. Provide a fund, training, and counseling to support young newlyweds to purchase homes, childcare, healthy nutrition, and facilitate early life literacy. Number 34, create a structure for educating youth and adults in culturally centered vocational education by investing in already existing academies, along with charter schools, home and community schooling, independent of the current public education structure. Number 35, we must create programs to overcome widespread disculturosis. And 36, read my books at all levels daily. And you have my link to my previous website, which is actually still up, but I did move everything to consciousrastapress.com, www.consciousrastapress.com. Please do check it out. This is undeniably an ambitious set of strategies. Such will require complete and total mobilization by all entities within the control of our ethnic group. This mobilization must include the grassroots, non-governmental agencies, public and private sector entities, colleges and universities, along with an unprecedented effort from Black media and every journalist of African heritage in the affected nations. Can we do it? Will we do it? Is it too late for us to save ourselves from the terrible fate which I have forecast in my previous book, Fade to Black, the passing of a great race? So that's our challenge. And we are challenged. It is an existential challenge that we face today. And as such, cannot be ignored. If you know that someone is holding a gun to your children's head, and that unless you act deliberately and swiftly, their gun will go off and your children will lose everything, lose their life, what would you do? You would do anything and everything within your intelligence and within your power. You would even substitute your body for your child's body. Well, we are at the point now where it's not just our children. The gun is held to the head of our childbearing age population, our elders, wise and esteemed elders, and everyone of working age from 18 to 64. That gun is held to our head. It's called Fade to Black. Fading is like the frog in a pot of water. Well, they put the frog in when the water's cool, but they turn the heat on, and the frog stays in the water as the water gets hotter and hotter and hotter. Chapter 2 is entitled The 6 Pillars of Empire. This is taken from earlier work as well. This African proverb, if you are building a house and a nail breaks, do you stop building or do you change the nail? African proverb. Chapter 2, The 6 Pillars of Empire. I began with, first of all, we have to understand population wars, culture wars. This goes all the way back to my 1996 books, including a bunch of them. In fact, I go through conspiracies do exist. Anytime an accusation of conspiracy theories is cast, that person is being accused should ask their accuser the simple questions. Do conspiracies exist? If conspiracies do exist, then is it possible to put forward evidence that surpasses the ideas that such is mere theory? The obvious answer to these two questions are yes and yes. When it comes to population control, a conspiracy not only exists, but is also not buried so deep under layers of concealment. Over the decades, I have addressed this population imperative in various modes of analysis across most of my books. Population War on the Eve of the 21st Century, Another Loaded Needle, Population War, Report from the Frontline, Vaccines, An Ounce of Prevention or a Pound of Death, Prisons, Rap, Hip Hop, and the New World Order, Missing Assets, Busted, the Latex Condom Conspiracy, AIDS, the establishment confesses, it's now called AIDS, the Great Deception, Conspiracies and High Crimes of Murder, The Road to Power, Kujichagulia villages, a practical plan for self-determination, Africa rising, a new scramble for Africa, the repairing, futurenomics, the blackest soil, panic, conscious Rasta perspectives, fade to black, the survival papers. The universal theme tying all of these studies together is demographics. Webster Merriam Online allows us to comprehend the importance of these matters. Demographics, definition, demography, sociology, the statistical study of human populations, especially with reference to size and density, distribution, and vital statistics. Sociology, relating to the dynamic balance of a population, especially with regard to density and capacity for expansion or decline. And demographics, plural, the statistical characteristic of human populations such as age or income used especially to identify markets. Across my decades of research, the logical science of demography has allowed me to access powerful insights and broader perspectives regarding change and transformation within society. From my perspective as a scientific futurist, this study of the various dynamics of people's numbers is generally regarded as the most important, quote, ology. Within this imperative to accurately place the importance of demographics within the lexicon of societal development, my demographic studies have traversed net numbers of people within groups, proportional representation, economic status of any group, hierarchical status of groups within a larger society, fertility trends affecting a group, race and ethnicity, cultural patterns, as well as behavioral organizing from group leaders that impact the group's long-term viability. Collectively, these comprehensions reaffirm the critical importance of what I have frequently named rule number 1, survival of the fittest. So just real quickly, I'm going to go through just a couple chapter headlines, subchapter headlines. Scientific futurism reinforces group identity. The 6 pillars of empire I mentioned here, they are, number 1, a strong base of demographic strength. 2, the ability to convert natural resources into finished products and services. 6 pillars of empire. Number 3, the growth of a robust internal commerce system. Number 4, production of surplus beyond the group's needs for foreign trade and wealth accumulation. Number 5 of the 6 pillars, capacity for providing security for the group and its industrial assets, along with an expansion of the empire. And 6, training its youth to manage and sustain the economic affairs of the group for generations. I've written about the 6 pillars many times since first publishing the formula in 2016 in the book, The Repairing. I'm going to cover that one in our second hour. And that 6 pillars is very important. Pillar 1, I then explain each of them in detail, and you do need to understand each of those in detail, especially pillar number 2, primary economic enterprise. The ability to convert natural resources into finished products and services is at the core of any identified group's prospering. These natural resources include processing minerals, agriculture, fishing industries, and creating light, medium, and heavy industry manufacturing across a spectrum of products that support life. In yesterday's report, we talked about, or either yesterday's report or I may have been writing yesterday. I have another book coming out. You saw the book, Awakening the Crown. That's my 3rd book in this current series. A 4th one will be out. I'm just finishing it. I'm doing the last parts of the book. I got to do 2 more read-throughs, 1 to correct the grammar and 2 to set the index so you'll find what you're looking for in the book. The new book is called Steamships, the acronym. You know that. So pillar 2, the primary economic enterprise imperative also includes managing our labor as if it were a natural resource. When a group's labor is undervalued in the marketplace, it is a great advantage to the haves and debilitating advantage to the have-nots. The very same black labor that served the building of the agricultural wealth of the Western Hemisphere and significantly aided the expansion of the world's largest industrial base during and after World War II, has now largely gone fallow. Black labor is being wasted, underappreciated, and misdirected into group self-limiting behaviors and severely underpriced in the marketplace. Our laborious toil, along with the failure to exploit abundance of other natural resources all around us, will continue to be a gaping wound in our people's progress unless a powerful strategic program is pushed into effecting functioning very soon. And then we talk about internal trade, external trade, pillar 4. It's also very important. Expansion of territory and security. Let me read this. The group exists, and it has positive demographics that sustain its long-term viability. Many members have created robust industries using the broad base of natural resources accessible within the territory under the group's control. Under this scenario that I am portraying, the 6 pillars of empire, this spectrum of industrial goods, products, and services can sustain the group's entire livelihood as a nation. Once such needs are fulfilled, these remain a surplus. There remains a surplus that is marketed to other communities outside of our identified self-serving market. We use this surplus to create wealth. With all elements in position and expansion, there will be need to access more territory. We need additional geography for an expanding population, increased access to natural resources for our growing industrial production. We need more land for housing growth, agricultural productivity, and extraction of minerals, and a spectrum of geological resources to sustain our great enterprises. Along with such accumulation of territory comes a critical need to develop the capacity for providing security for the group and its industrial assets. With such expanding wealth, along comes a corresponding expansion of the empire. The sad and tragic fact is that regarding the expansion of secured territory available to sustain our development, as with the previous 4 of the 6 pillars of empire, Afri-Amirs are failing terribly, dismissive as well. To the contrary, our group continues to lose territory under the control of our domestic population with every passing decade. The cold fact is that Afri-Amirs have lost control over an estimated 86% of our collective lands over the past century. 86% of our lands lost. There's no group survival without enough geography to sustain itself regarding food production, industry, housing, recreation, and other important societal functions. It should be blatantly apparent to any of us who would pay attention that we must reverse this trend of being stripped of our lands. We must also change the terrible insecurity that plagues our communities, the shrinking territories that we still occupy. And then pillar number 6, education of our youth to power. Ours must be a proper formula for permanent power. So let me go out of this first chapter. Chapter 3, I repeat from the previous book, which we're actually going to cover in the next hour. Chapter 3, 9 foundations for reparations. Just one quote. There is no such thing as destiny. We ourselves shape our lives. From Giacomo Casanova. What will make us whole? That's the next book, The Repairing. And I'm going to skip over that right now. I do talk about there is a river, the legacy of reparations. That's all very important. But I'm skipping over this. We're going to take this on next hour. So let's go to chapter 4. And chapter 4, COVID-19. Is our health our wealth? I ask the question. Most times it's not asked as a question. It is signed as an exclamation. Is our health our wealth? Quoting from G. Edward Griffin, the great culling of the human race has already begun. It's being done through chemicals added to our drinking water, food, medicines, the air we breathe, chemicals that have the known effect of reducing fertility and shortening life span. The thing about it is, so many of us are engaging in this. We call it, in the newer book, chewicide. And it's not just the food. It's in the hair, canacolon. It's in the makeup that many women and increasingly males are putting on their face, their skin. There's a one terrible, terrible saturation of the environment with endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs. If you don't know that, look it up. So just a couple of paragraphs. We did cover the book Panic yesterday. Nutrition and COVID-19. What does the science say? In May 2020, I published a very insightful book that examined the science behind the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. In Panic, what the coronavirus tells us about the state of the world, I sought to prove that much of what was being stated about the danger of the so-called novel coronavirus or zoonotic virus outbreak was not founded on solid scientific methods. As well, the responses of various government and global health agencies were based upon flawed proposals. To validate the conclusion reached in Panic, I assembled a long list of 173 references, most of them from peer-reviewed literature, as well as news stories on the science, data, and press releases from relevant agencies. I also included such information as packaging data for that accompanies medications and diagnostic tests associated with the pandemic. I concluded that several foundational understandings about a COVID-19 were contradicted by solid research science. These fundamental challenges concluded that the public pronouncements of media coverage of science regarding the pandemic and global response raised 7 critical points of failure. Point 1, the isolation and proof of a distinct pathological agent failed. Point 2, hard evidence that the identified virus that they didn't identify directly causes pathogenesis, as is reported, 29 comorbidities. Point 3, proof of infection with the various testing procedures, antibody assay, RT-PCR, CT scan, each of which is plagued by non-specificity and low scores for positive predictive value. Point 4, credible and reliable epidemiological evidence of a pandemic infection uniquely attributed to the alleged virus. It failed. Point number 5, safe and effective treatment protocol for those identified as infected has not been standardized. Point 6, masking and social distancing strategies for public protection have never proven effective and seem nonsensical when we consider that viruses are ubiquitous in the atmosphere. They're everywhere, to the point that 800 million viruses fall out of the sky to the surface of the earth per every square meter every day. 800,000 viruses. And last point, a rush to global vaccination as an ultimate preventative strategy was a highly risky proposal. After the first year, it has proven to be as ineffective as well as very dangerous. In the 15 months since the publication of Panic, I am immensely proud of how solidly the research in the book has stood up to immense scrutiny. I made several predictions in the book that have come to pass since June 2020. Going forward, and I do list on page 37 the 29 comorbidities. And I added a bunch of them. I'm going to read them from 15 onwards. Blood clots. 16, hyperlipidemia, meaning obesity or high triglyceride levels. Number 17, pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome, Kawasaki disease, shock syndrome. 18, sensory impairment, loss of smell and taste. 19, diarrhea. 20, conjunctivitis, pink eye. 21, liver-associated pathology and cirrhosis. That could be called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the following are added to this list between May 2020 and January 2021. 22 on this list, obesity. 23, pregnancy. 24, Down syndrome. These are comorbidities, people suffering from this as they were also suffering, quote unquote, suffering from the virus. 24, Down syndrome. 25, smoking. 26, sickle cell disease. 27, cystic fibrosis. 28, thalassemia, an inherited blood disorder that causes your body to have less hemoglobin than normal, anemia. And then number 29, malaria. Based upon my June 2021 experience in Uganda with my Plasmodium malariae parasite infection triggering a positive reading on a COVID-19 antibody testing on 2 occasions. So I go on. Let's go to the next chapter. This is the book Paradigm Shift. We got another about 12 minutes before we're going to move to the next book. And this is so good. And I do get to numbers, and it gets rather technical in this book. But that's okay, because I take you up to the technical stuff. And so then I even listed what I created as a list of solutions to help us prevent this. Chapter 5, Orchestrating a Masterful Plan, begins with the following quote. This from Charles Eisenstein of Sacred Economics, Money, Grift, and Society in the Age of Transition. He wrote, and I quote, "The present convergence of crises in money, energy, education, health, water, soil, climate, politics, the environment, and more is a birth crisis. We sense expelling," he says, "a birth crisis expelling us from the old world into a new. We sense that normal, quote unquote, isn't coming back, that we're being born into a new normal, a new kind of society, a new relationship to the earth, a new experience of being human." Again, from Charles Eisenstein. And I talk about a social engineering formula. So at this point, chapter 5, which is about not even close to the middle, about the first quarter of the book, we are on page 50. I'm now putting into place solutions. So this is part of the solutions. We have tried and failed at praying a solution in the process by petitioning to invisible deities. We must be more scientific and systematic in our approach. Social engineering is the method by which the leaders of large structures redirect a people's resources and focus on mass mobilization aimed at solving widespread problems affecting the group. Note the following very precise formula for social engineering. Now, you've heard me say this a few times before. I'm expanding it today. This is from The Hidden Persuaders, the book by Vance Packard, 1957. In their efforts to be cooperative with the persuaders, the scientists also showed some tendency to accept assumptions that definitely were dubious. In 1953, a leading advertising researcher concluded that Americans would have to learn to live a third better if they were to keep pace with growing production and permit the United States economy to hit a $400 billion gross national product in 1958. Actually, it shot past the 400 billion mark in 1956. To find how Americans could be persuaded to live a third better, Tide put the question to, quote, quite a few of the leading U.S. sociologists, unquote. The response of Professor Philip J. Allen of the University of Virginia was particularly interesting. He mapped out a systematic program by which it could be achieved and stressed that his scheme would require sufficient financial backing for regular utilization of mass media constantly to communicate the desired objectives to the common man. New values can be deliberately created, disseminated, and adopted as personal and collective goals, highly desirable of achievement. But the concerted effort of the major social institutions, particularly the educational, recreational, and religious, must be enlisted with the ready cooperation of those in control of the mass media, on the one hand, and the large creators of goods and services who buy up time and space for advertising their wares, on the other. By using the various tested devices, our modern genius in advertising may, I'm going to have to stop. One sec. Oop, don't do that. Do this. And turn the mic back on when I finish. Okay, the mic is back on. So I'm not going to drop out today unless somebody else turns it off. So let me back up. By enlisting the ready cooperation of those in control of the mass media on the one hand, and the large creators of goods and services who buy up time and space for advertising their wares on the other. By utilizing the various tested devices, our modern genius in advertising may alight upon simple phrases, well organized in sequence and timing, and coordinated with other efforts geared to realize the grand design. But there are required a host of laborers with plenty of financial backing. In mapping out his grand design for making us all more dutiful consumers, he accepted without any question that I could note the basic assumption that achieving the 1/3 better goal was worth any manipulating that might be necessary to achieve it. That was an expanded reading from Philip J. Allen, cited in the book The Hidden Persuaders by Vance Packard, 1957. That's also so very important. We're about to change books, but I'm going to give you a couple more headlines and bullet points that are relevant. This is orchestrating a master plan. I then go through a list, a need for dramatic change. I hope that you will find something important and inspiring in the following presentation I had done earlier at Morehouse University called Paradigm Shift. And I'm going to skip over that. It's all very important, though. Calls for a paradigm shift in society. This is just a series of 4 or 5 quotes. First quote: a new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die, and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. That from Max Planck. Next quote from Charles Eisenstein. I think I cited this earlier. The present convergence of crises in money, energy, education, health, water, soil, climate, politics, the environment, and more is a birth crisis, expelling us from the old world into a new. We sense that normal isn't coming back, that we are being born into a new normal, a new kind of society, a new relationship to the earth, a new experience of being human. Charles Eisenstein. 2 more quotes. 1, believing and investing in yourself is the best way to shift your thinking from a paradigm of excuses to one of solutions. That from Farshad Asil from the book No More Excuses. And then lastly, from Thomas Stark, any scientist that wants to change the prevailing paradigm is automatically branded a heretic, apostate, infidel, blasphemer, maverick, or lunatic. Exactly as what happens with religion. The scientist must break with his peers and have his job, career, and funding placed in extreme jeopardy. How many careerist scientists are up for that? The answer is 0. The result is that scientists go on thinking what the establishment and the funding bodies expect them to think. Even though they themselves must, deep down, know that they are supporting ludicrous claims that make no sense. That from Thomas Stark, Extra Scientism, Nulla Status, How Science Undermines Reason. And that's a very important thing. How science undermines reason, how schools undermine education, how so many institutions undermine, how banks destroy our finances, etc., etc. Bear with me, but the mucus is trying to clear today, and I'm doing the best I can. Chapter 6 is entitled A Pedagogy of Sustainable Development. And my newest book, which you will learn about here in a few more days, the newest book deals with this new pedagogy as I spell out what the curriculum will be. And the pedagogy as a word means, of course, education. I begin that chapter with this quote, Marcus Garvey, quote, Emancipation Day. Knowing the sufferings of my forefathers, I shall give back to Africa that liberty that she once enjoyed hundreds of years ago, before her own sons and daughters were taken from her shores and brought in chains to this Western world. The next chapter in the book, I do lay out in this book what is called steamships. The chapter begins on page 60, and steamships is my next book, Sail African Children to Excellence. Just 2 paragraphs. I've taken the STEM acronym for education even further. I have proposed the idea of STEAM ships, education for African youth to power. In this newly expanded system honors our ancestors who were members of Marcus Garvey-led UNIA-ACL, whose great records of achievement included purchasing steam ships toward the aim of constructing an African-owned transatlantic commerce system. Toward honoring these great ancestors, it is our mission to create steamships, leadership training for our youth. And I then spell out this steamships acronym: S, science; T, technology; E, engineering; A, arts; M, mathematics; S, spirituality; H, holistic health; I, innovation; P, prosperity; and S, sustainability. I am proud to have an extensive collection of books in my library, along with many thousands of digital documents that guide us along a pathway toward an empowering pedagogy that will empower us to educate our youth to empirical status. And then I go forward. We're going to go to the next chapter. We're not even halfway through the book, but I think you understand what this book is about. The next chapter is entitled, What is Scientific Futurism? And scientific futurism is ultimately the base by which we map out our pathway into the future. If you were guiding a large ship across an ocean or a destination to which you have to be precise at your arrival, but you've never made the trip, you would use scientific futurism to map that course out. And I'm just going to skip over the quotation that opens that chapter, even though it's very, very important. Chapter 8, we have what the world wants. What's in your hands, said Adam Clayton Powell. What's in your hand? And with God's hand in your hand, the victory will be accomplished here sooner than you dreamed, sooner than you hoped, sooner than you prayed for, sooner than you imagined. That from Adam Clayton Powell. What is in your hand? And we go through liabilities and assets. We got to be clear. What is in our hands? Including the adoption of a foreign and hostile culture. And economic dependence. What's in our hands? Provocation, propaganda, and mind control. What is in our hands? Inadequately equipped leadership. These are liabilities. To an extent, we are failing at education and literacy. Disconnect from our African heritage. the lowest tier. We occupy the lowest tier in the political economic hierarchy of the countries in which we live. And our youth suffer entrapment within the criminal justice systems of the nation, as well as blacks in the U.S. have a tremendous and crippling debt burden. And I'm going to go forward to the next chapter. We have what the world wants, but unfortunately, the world is not trading us equitable trade. They're just taking it from us. And then I do list our assets as well. Assets, including skills, capabilities, assets, and talents, glorious historical record, deeply spiritual and moral values, substantial economic base. We are courageous, committed, and consistently sacrifice. And we have some of the most creative artists in the world of today, of all historical record, and many, many more assets we have. Chapter 9, I'm just give you a couple chapter titles, and then we're going to leave it. Futurenomics Plan for Sustainable Development. I did publish that book. We're going to come up on that book real soon. Futurenomics. And then we're talking about the next chapter title, Chapter 10, Education of Youth and Development. And Youth Development. Preparing the millennial generation to rule it all. Black Demographics and Fertility Matters. Chapter 11 is entitled Growing SME Enterprises. SME stands for Small, Medium-Sized Enterprises. Next, Chapter 12 is entitled Strategic Investing for Group Wealth. Now, this is really important. I quote from Albert Einstein, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." Actually, not attributable to Albert Einstein. He never said that, although many people say he said it. He didn't say it. But I think it's very true. The next chapter, after strategic investment for group wealth, is, quote, assembling the 6-part partnership. That's where we begin. It's not so difficult. And I am doing my best to assemble the grassroots as well as the NGOs, as well as if any politicians will be listening to my show, any business owners, I'm doing my best to give you and us the basis by which we assemble this working partnership. 6 parts. It's not that complicated. Chapter 14, Global Integration, Africa Rising to Global Power. And just one point I'm going to make from the African Union document, Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is gaining momentum. It is time for action. Be part of the transformation. And then, lastly, I got to quote Sheikh Anta Diop. A federated Black Africa has the potential to become both industrial and politically as powerful as either the USSR or the United States. This book, Paradigm Shift, it's been out now for a few years. I'm not necessarily satisfied that our audience is actually being reached at the rate that I think the book deserves. But we're going to do our best. The book is Paradigm Shift. And I'm trying to put it up on YouTube. And YouTube rejected it one time. And then I put it up as next time. I have to share the link another way. All I just said is the book is at the beginning of it. And I put it all right back up. So for our family on Rumble, I don't have that problem. YouTube is funky. YouTube don't like me. They banned me, threw me off, deleted all my files, but they couldn't stop my voice. And I am going to be working much, much more with other YouTube broadcasters as we go into our next book study for today. This book is one of the most important and one of the longest books I ever published at 320 pages. It is rather comprehensive. Let's go into the repairing. And the repairing has very powerful, powerful things all across this book. And let me read the back cover. Ooh, no, the back cover are quotes about me, about my writing. Let me just share with you two of them. The first one is from John E. Brown, Managing Director of Apico Partners, the guru of impact giving and investing. Quote, Kitty is a futurist. Since history tends to repeat itself, it is again time for those of us of African descent to have the greatest influence over a world order where people are first, environment is preserved, and profit is made. For those of you who are conscious, awake, and conscientious, this is a critical read from John Brown. And lastly, from Ankh Aku. Kidi Owadu is a Pan-Africanist media expert who has reported on the most important stories and revelations for our global family. This tour de force calls for our people to embrace the age where we are living in. The repairing is the clarion call of our time. Africa is rising, and now we have the handbook to execute that rise. From Ankh Aku, CEO, Better Marketing Mastery. You know, Ankh used to have a show on LIB Radio. He was a great, great partner. The African-centered marketing paradigm. And lastly, I'm going to share this other quote. This one from Chike Akua. I don't know why I had such a hard time getting his name out. Chike Akua. You know Chike. He's one of the baddest brothers of a generation. And I'm proud to know him and very proud to have his words on my book cover. For decades now, Kidi Owadu has been on the cutting edge of providing critical, solution-centered research for the African community. With a practical Pan-African perspective and tech-savvy sophistication, he has provided insightful analysis along with empowering action plans. The Repairing follows the same tradition and is a must-read for self-determined Africans seeking sovereignty. From Chike Akua, PhD educator and author of Honoring Our Ancestral Obligations. And get Chike's books if you want to have a wonderful time putting information that changes and challenges our lives into your head. Get Chike's books. You will never regret it. This book has so very many important chapters, and I'm reluctant to skip over. Let me introduce just 4 paragraphs from the introduction, if you don't mind. The Repairing, making reparations practical. What if reparations were such a practical idea that we deliberately took the lead and did it for ourselves? What if we discovered ourselves today as at the leading edge of one of the most significant changes in world history to occur in many centuries? Would you do everything within your power to create the capstone to hundreds of years of our people's tremendous self-sacrifice so that our children and future generations would inherit the most powerful empire that history has ever known? A quote from Frederick Douglass. You have seen now how a man was made a slave. You shall see how a slave was made a man. Frederick Douglass. Seizing the reparations initiative now. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs at the beginning, 2 paragraphs at the end of this introduction. Seizing the reparations initiative now. Like a deer caught in the mesmerizing headlights of an approaching truck, there you are on the highway, and your gaze is fixated on something rapidly approaching. This is something that you have never seen before, although you know deep in the recesses of your mind that there is nothing new under the sun. So your mind scrambles to make sense of this thing that is approaching, which seems to be getting more massive with each passing second. You see its approach, and at a certain point, your ears have confirmed what is bearing down upon you is increasing from what was barely a perceptible sound just moments before. Your physical sense of this mass increases as you start to feel the ground rumble under your feet. The increasing diffusion of these sensory perceptions combine to draw you into a trance. Mesmerized, you stand there frozen as your senses become ever more excited with this mass which is bearing down directly upon you. My friend, you have a big problem which you will need to deal with, and your time for indecision has expired. Something that's never happened to you is impending. You are about to be run over by something that can best be the equivalent of a speeding truck, which has passed the point that its braking system would spare your catastrophe. You are in the pathway of a historical disaster, and you never experienced, and for which you've never been properly instructed by those who know from their own direct experience what is about to happen. You have run out of time, and the culture and civilization within which you have been accustomed to living are no longer capable of sustaining your existence or that of your children. What I am attempting to draw to your attention to has been called, quote, a clash of civilizations. And what you don't know is that so much of what you have become accustomed to is now an integral part of your inability to survive the catastrophe which is at hand. Those are just the first two paragraphs of the introduction. It goes on. And this, wow. I'm going to go to the last two paragraphs of the introduction. And the introduction itself goes on for a number of pages. The last two paragraphs. Three paragraphs, because they're kind of short. Our babies are born bright, precocious, and a delight to every member of family and community. We need not diminish their life prospects by failing to provide for their nurturing to successful adulthood adequately. We can build for these children and their living grandparents such a brilliant culture and global society that the other enlightened peoples of the world will once again look upon the African with esteem and great appreciation for the status which we have created for ourselves, have carved out for ourselves in the ever ongoing competition for prestige, security, and national capacity. There is every reason on earth for Africans to be optimistic, well informed as to our capacities, and excited to engage in a continuity of tasks which confirm our aspirations to greatness. We are indeed a winner. We won't let nobody hold us back. And so we should indeed just, quote, keep on pushing. That's the introduction. Chapter 1, extracting ourselves from the pit. And I begin with this very profound quotation. When it comes to reparations, I am building on the shoulders of my great ancestors, those who came before us. And one of the greatest that I have personally known in my life was the late, great Ken Bridges, who was assassinated in 2010, I believe, by the, quote, BC sniper. He said this, and I transcribed it. We owe ourselves internal reparations. We don't have to ask anybody for it. We don't have to beg anybody for it. We don't have to plead to anybody to give it to us. We simply must do two things. We've got to love ourselves more and love our race more, and then we will look inside and do for ourselves. Ken Bridges, co-founder of the Mata Network. And I'm going to skip over much of this chapter. This is extracting ourselves from the pit. This is all so very real. I'm going to stop right in the middle of the chapter and read a couple of paragraphs. We are witnessing endless rounds of reactionary finger pointing at chimeras, frightening but mythological fire-breathing dragons, as the source of our shortcomings. There seems to be a convenient boogeyman waiting around every corner to absorb the blame for our individual or group shortcomings, be it the man, the government, white people, Christianity, Jews, the Illuminati, feminists, corporations, the media, the police, or large cast of external entities. It has become all too popular and convenient for loud voices within our community to direct us away from our indigenous responsibility, self-reliance, and capacity for doing better. Certain of these, quote, race hustlers are quick to steer us clearly into remaining perpetual victims to any convenient external sources that have demonstrated past obstacles to our progress. And let's go forward. Ooh, this is good. This is good. And we talk about the previous book, New Strategies for a New Millennium, where we talk about moving beyond racism. I am no longer race reactionary, and I think I'm not the only one who exited that gate. Wow, this is a long chapter, overcoming ourselves, extracting ourselves from the pit. We thus commence to repairing ourselves, subchapter. As Eldridge Cleaver famously said, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem. We must focus our vast spectrum of resources toward the strategic vision of creating a global transformation that becomes our living legacy. We should revive development models from within the periods of greatest accomplishment within the history of our noble race. Our youth should not only know the biographies of these great leaders, but also should be expected by all to become even better, higher accomplishing than those who came before them, whose actions gifted this race with immense pride through achievement. Each child should be encouraged to stand before the community and recite their own personal council of ancestral advisors. I have used this inspiring process for decades. My council includes Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Ida Wells Barnett, George Washington Carver, Madam C.J. Walker, Mary McLeod Bethune, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., in addition to my talented parents and the one grandfather I've known. There are just so many historical figures who are on record as highly accomplishing ancestors, along with living elders who have risen from our unique historical experience to inspire our people to ever greater achievement. And I did not even mention Thomas Sankara. I didn't even mention Patrice Lumumba, Chris Hani, Stephen Biko. I didn't even mention our ancestors from Brazil, Colombia, Haiti, from across the Caribbean. There's so many who do inspire us. Every time I see their names, I stop and I acquire knowledge, wisdom, and inspiration. We thus commence to repairing ourselves. Chapter 2, the 9 foundations for reparations. This is the key chapter on the basis for which we demand reparations. Let me give you the 9. One quote. This is a great one from Zora Neale Hurston, one of the greatest writers of our time. The new book, I do mention Zora Neale Hurston. She's very important. She writes, quote, I am not tragically colored. There is no great sorrow dammed up in my soul, nor lurking behind my eyes. Even in the helter-skelter skirmish that is my life, I have seen that the world is to the strong, regardless of a little pigmentation more or less. Nor do I weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife. Zora Neale Hurston. Praise be your eternal name. Our methods, I'm skipping a couple of pages. The 9 areas for reparations which we will focus in more now, detail, could easily make up an entire volume for publication. Yet I will strive to be as concise as possible in describing these areas. Throughout the entire book, these will serve as the foundations by which we will create practical avenues for correction and advancement. These 9 areas for reparations encompass: number 1, compensation for stolen labor. 2, land recovery. 3, family and community. 4, economic development. 5, education. 6, revising our historical perspective. 7, transnational relations. 8, repairing our health status. 9, crime and justice. Throughout this book, each of these broad categories will be further broken down into numerous subcategories. So just one of these I'm going to cite right now, compensation for stolen labor. And it goes on for various pages. How could one possibly go about the task of calculating an immeasurable cost of the stolen labor and the immense, immeasurable grievances committed against tens of millions of persons enslaved, brutalized, robbed, lynched, or unjustly incarcerated, displaced, and otherwise abused by the centuries-long suffering of our African ancestors brought to just this land of America from the early 17th century onward? How do we correct that? Well, I can only tune into a formula, and I have this formula, against America, which is where our first and primary reparations is directed. Not only America, Britain, France, Spain, Italy, they all participated in crimes against our humanity, genocide. But we're calculating for the courts a charge against America. We have recent examples of citizens wronged by the government agencies, law enforcement, or the judiciary, who were compensated for each year of abuse, suffering, and incarceration that followed unjust jailing. Some of these published accounts show compensation rates for being locked away to the amount of reasonable average of about $30,000 per year. Yet recognizing that this is just for unjustified confinement, not extending to torture, abuse, and forced labor without compensation. For our formula, this figure will stand $30,000 a year. Point 2, calculating the total number of Africans who were enslaved in America during the period of chattel slavery was a difficult task. We can find projections that 10 to 12 million Africans were kidnapped and deposited in the Western Hemisphere, some 650,000 of whom made it to the colonies, which formed the U.S. from as early as 1640. At the time the USA declared independence, 1776, the population of enslaved Africa was estimated at 500,000, but by 1860, the U.S. Census estimated that they had grown to nearly 4 million. A cumulative total of enslaved blacks in this nation is harder to research, but a reasonable deduction based upon generational lifespan might put our estimate to 12 to 15 million or more, the median of which we shall use at 13.5 million enslaved Africans during the period of existence of the United States. What was the average life expectancy of an enslaved person in the U.S.? Largely due to high infant mortality and early death due to exhaustion and violence, life expectancy for enslaved blacks in the U.S. was only 30 years, 17% shorter than the general population. Thus, to generate this formula for total labor reparations due, since slavery was generally a lifelong condition, compensation for every year of life is central to our calculation of the unpaid debt due to the individual, whose lifetime compensation in today's dollars would have been at least, very least, $900,000. Today, those with associate college degrees are estimated to earn 1.1 million in their lifetime, while those with advanced degrees can expect to earn an average of 1.8 million. Understandably, our calculations err on the conservative side, especially when we consider that enslaved persons were expected to work from sunup to sundown 6 days a week with minimal breaks during the workday, likely exceeding 60 hours of labor weekly during their prime laborious years. How many legally emancipated freedmen were kidnapped and forced into slavery when they're with the tacit support of government agencies? It is a fact that thousands of blacks were snatched off the streets and transported into slaving territories. Such snatching freedmen was increasingly problematic after the federal government passed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. This was called the, quote, reverse underground railroad, and it was prevalent in cities such as New York and Philadelphia. It was reported that over 100 such kidnappings of men, women, and children occurred in Philadelphia within just 1 2-year period. Children were particularly victims of such kidnappings. The U.S. Supreme Court's infamous Dred Scott decision of 1857 further reinforced the federal government's collusion with institutionalized slavery. So, kidnapping of children, the molesting, the rapes, all of that is so horrendous. We cannot put a price on that. But I am putting a price on stolen labor. The single greatest of the reparations bill is unpaid interest on the lifetime compensation that was rightfully due to enslaved persons who were never paid for their labor. Because this yet remains the unpaid debt, the wealth generated from this uncompensated labor was never passed on to subsequent generations. Beyond that, that's an important point. Because this is yet remains unpaid debt, the wealth generated from this uncompensated labor was never passed on to subsequent generations. Beyond mere unpaid labor, modern courts would additionally award for pain and suffering brought about because of such cruel inhumanity. Unfortunately, that is a figure that we cannot adequately factor into our equation. Assuming a moderate interest rate of 5% on an unpaid debt, accumulating merely from the end of our era of enslavement, this will produce a stupendous outcome. If we use today's dollar equivalents, just one person enslaved and unpaid for 30 years at an annual compensation of $30,000 in today's dollars would also have earned compound interest, just as the very same type of debt obligation that you and I are held to. Thus today, that unpaid $900,000 that $900,000 accumulating at a moderate interest rate of 5% from 1860 to date would have accumulated an unpaid debt balance of $1.818 billion per person. This calculation is a conservative estimation of reparations debt due to the descendants of each one of those who were violated. Seeing that each of our families have at least one ancestor who was enslaved, this labor and interest compensation should make Afro-American households the wealthiest ethnicity in the nation. But our wealth was steered into the coffers of others. How much money was made in profits from the centuries-long trafficking in humans as commodities? Between 1860 and the beginning of the end of enslavement period between 1800 and the beginning of the end of slavery period in 1860, the auction price of an estimate of an enslaved human increased on average from $1,300 to $3,000. All along the slave industry chain, there were profits to be made. Pioneering in human trafficking included trading captured prisoners on the African continent and reselling them at the departure points for the transatlantic voyage, as well as including the seaports, shippers, insurers, auction houses, money lenders, as well as those who manufactured boats and equipment, which all supported the human traffic. There is also to be considered the railroads, construction industries, fabric manufacturers, sugarcane industries, and other wholesale industrial sectors whose profit margins were dependent upon this base of uncompensated labor. Key, get to the point. Using a complex formula, which incorporates a cumulative estimate of 13.5 million estimated enslaved blacks in the U.S. since the nation's independence, a fair labor annual compensation in modern dollars of $30,000 per person per year, an average of 30 years of life spent enslaved, 5% compounding interest on $900,000 in unpaid debt, which is now accumulated for 156 years as of 2016, since emancipation began in 1860, as well as the profits made by those who profited as stakeholders in the inhuman trafficking. My determinately conservative estimate calculation of the reparations due bill for enslaving Africans within the United States between 1776 and 1860 equals an astounding $24.57 trillion. $24.57 trillion. And it goes on. I asked which institutions benefited from the slave trade. All of them did. Paradigm shifts, creating black wealth from black labor. In the spring of 2014, in preparation, I talk about this paradigm shift speech I gave at Morehouse. Very important, but it's not necessary to repeat right now. Number two, that's just number one, compensation for stolen labor, $24.57 trillion. United States will not pay that. They can never pay that. They can never pay that amount. So stop asking them for it. I'll give you better strategies. Number two, land recovery and development. And also, don't expect them to do it. They're not going to be able to do it. If you're not prepared to put all of your resources towards this idea of self-determined reparations, honoring your beloved ancestor, Ken Bridges. Point two, land recovery and development. We talk about, unfortunately, when it comes to land ownership and development, things are not going very well for Afro-Americans over the past century. Compared to land ownership and tenure in the aftermath of the Reconstruction period, where we made significant gains in land acquisition and development, we are currently doing very poorly. Examining land tenure records from 1912 in comparison to what is under our control today, some 85% of our collective land under control has been lost in the past century. This single metric alone is enough to predict doom for our group's economic status over the remainder of the 21st century and beyond. We've got to become aware of the factors which led to this great loss of land and how this single factor continues to produce more significant challenges as the problem of land deprivation persists. It goes on for several pages. This breakdown of the land, where it went, goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. Number three, reparations, family, and community. The very fabric of culture, society, and even civilization is bound to the enduring strength of family and community. During the centuries-long experience of enslavement, which we have come to call the Ma'afa, numerous assaults on the black family have produced devastation. Even attempting to list the myriad of offenses, too many of which have become self-inflicting, presents itself as quite an overwhelming task. These injuries would include kidnapping of fathers, mothers, and children, splitting up families during slave auctions and sales, forced breeding, extensive rape, molestation, and sexual mutilation, forcing segregation, separating mothers from their newborn children, creating economic conditions that undermine the stability of two-parent households, driving family members into exile through lynching and terrorism, unceasing anti-black propaganda, forced conversion to the religions of our colonizers, social welfare policies that undermined family unity, the promotion of dangerous and unnatural birth control, race-specific eugenics, and forced sterilization, urban renewal policies that broke up ethnic communities, gentrification and ethnic cleansing, co-opting black leadership, promoting sexual irresponsible and degenerate behaviors among our childbearing age population, encouraging consumption of products and services which undermine our reproductive health through ethnic-specific targeted marketing, ethnic-specific target marketing, unfair lending practices that undermine home and business real estate ownership, the prison industrial complex's impact on parent-child relations, as well as a broad spectrum of economic policies that deprive our families from transferring wealth forward for the benefit of future generations. That's just a list of the crimes against family and community. The sum of these offenses has presented the current generation with crippled family and community. Going to the next area of reparations, economic development. And that's been spoken about so much. I'm going to skip over that. But it's very important. This is important. These days, we as a distinct ethnic community within the United States only produce about one of every $7 that we spend as consumers. This observation is derived from the much touted black consumer power, quote unquote, projected to be as much as 1.3 trillion for the current year. What we spend compared to the income generated by black-owned businesses, some 2.584 million of which, on average, only generate about $60,000 each annually, thus presenting a collective producer outcome, which my best estimates determined to be no more than $182 billion this year. This was 2016. That is now expected to be about $212 billion, while we're spending $1.93 trillion. It's gotten much worse in the 10 years that this book has been out. This disproportionate ratio explains why we don't see the dollar circulate within the black business community for very long. The new book updates this. We simply don't produce enough of what we require as consumers to fulfill our needs and capture our spending. The good news is that we are creative, resourceful, widely skilled, and live within one of the most industrious nations in world history. Therefore, solving the challenge of economic dependency is not beyond our current capacity. Number 5, education. And this is all very important. Education of our youth to power is undeniably the most important element of our pedagogy that we would consider. We're talking about educating our youth to economic power. Educate our youth to not ever, ever, ever borrow money. Don't borrow money from the banks, from the enslavers, etc. If you're going to borrow any money, borrow money from a black cooperative bank. Now we've got to establish those black cooperative banks. If you're looking at Islam, in Islam, usury is considered a crime. It's immoral to lend money for profit. But if you look at the way we're acting, especially in collaboration with that group, obviously usury is that group's advantage over us. Number 6, revising our historical perspective. Throughout this report, we will refer to the critical importance of culture as the most important significant transforming agent within society. Culture is our spiritual expression, linguistic communication, our expressed values, common traditions, logical thought processes, as well as our perspective of history. Far too many Afro-American individuals and institutions are teaching from the perspective that our history and national emergence begins with embarkation from the slave ships. By adopting the perspective that we are a people created and shaped in large part by the racist history of our oppression, we paint ourselves into a corner whereby we are cut off from a tremendous base of critically needed resources from our global history, current state of international affairs, as well as a future where transnational Pan-African collaboration will be a key determinant of our group's global success. As well as too often these false narratives. I'm going to have to go real fast, real forward. So let me go there. That just shows you the problem. We're correcting it. It's number 7, reparations, transnational relations. We must have reparations to repair our global family. Outside the African continent, there are many countries with black majority populations or significant numbers of blacks upon which we should be developing collaborative relations. The largest 11 of these nations was listed within an online website in December 2015, and many of these numbers are in need of update. But I list them. Brazil, 85.78 million blacks, it's crossed 100 million. United States, second, 45.7 million. I've updated that number to over 62 million blacks and black relatives within our population in this country. Number 3, Colombia, 9.45 million. Number 4, Haiti, 8.7 million blacks. 5, Dominican Republic, 7.99 million blacks. 6, France, 5 million blacks. 7, Jamaica, 2.73 million blacks. Number 8, Venezuela, 2.64 million blacks who did nothing. Our people in this country did nothing to prevent the recent assault on Venezuela. 2.64 million blacks. Number 9, United Kingdom at 2.02 million blacks. Number 10, Cuba, 1.13 million blacks. And number 11, Trinidad and Tobago, 1.05 million blacks. If you put together the present of global population of African descended people exceeding 1.5 billion, portends a demographic potential that, once raised to functional unity, competes directly with China, India, the EU, and USA combined of the global Islamic population, or the global Islamic population. During the course of this strategic study and planning for the repairing, we will clearly demonstrate how global demographics will be key to building a powerful, sustainable. Just real quickly, you heard me go through the 9 areas. Number 8 is repairing our health status. All very, very clear. 1 paragraph, yet there is not much alarm when an estimated 1.069 million Americans of all ethnicities will succumb to iatrogenic death by doctor, this year, of which 170,000 blacks will be included. Premature death by doctor. When we compare to police homicides, iatrogenic episodes will kill at a ratio of 900 to 1 for all Americans, or a ratio of 425 to 1 for blacks. If all Black lives matter, then we might need to redirect much more of our reactive outrage than to this devastating statistic of the impact of bad medical practices that we are prematurely ending the lives of many of our family members prematurely. Our elderly, our peers, and community members. That's just one half of 1 paragraph. And we're talking about our health status. I bear with me. In the middle of a paragraph, I'm really touched. And I'm just going to kind of just wrap this up, summarize. As with many other drugs, chemotherapies currently in use for malaria do come with notorious side effects, which can include nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, convulsions, heartburn, skin eruptions, rapid heartbeat, loss of bladder control, increased sensitivity to sunlight, large hive-like swelling on the body's soft tissues, including eyelids, lips, tongue, throat, and sex organs, muscle spasms, severe mental changes, and many more severe and minor complications. What would be the outcome if these Western medical strategies became the new norm and nearly all of Africa's inhabitants became dependent upon taking these chemotherapies on a constant basis? Such an outcome is unacceptable, and they are testing the malaria vaccine on our people. And lastly, we'll go to crime and justice, the 9th area of reparations. America has a huge problem with crime, justice, violence, and incarceration. If incarceration in the U.S. would be considered a bad case of the flu, then for African Americans, the analogy would be that of a case of raging pneumonia. An article appeared in a Huffington Post heightened this catastrophe by comparing imprisonment within the nation of India, which has about 1.2 billion people, to the U.S. with a quarter of that population. Yet the U.S. incarceration of just blacks was higher than the total prison populations in India, Argentina, Canada, Lebanon, Japan, Germany, Finland, Israel, and England combined. Reparations. The incarceration rate of just blacks. All of those nations, including India alone, with 3 times the population of the U.S., 4 times the population combined. The Pew Charitable Trust published a report entitled 1 in 31, The Long Reach of American Corrections, in which it revealed that growth in, quote, the population of American correction system, which had swollen to more than 7.3 million, or 1 in every 31 U.S. adults, slightly less than 3% of the national population. From that report, we can now determine that today 1 in 11 blacks are under the control of correctional facilities, a stunning 9.2% of our population. For Hispanics, the rate of corrections was 3.7%, and for whites, 2.2%. So, reparations, the 9 areas of foundation for the reparations. I'm going to have to skip forward. We do have solutions in this. That was just chapter 2 of the book. Chapter 3, Visions of a New Day. 2 quotes I want to share. From George Washington Carver, he says, where there is no vision, there is no hope. And the second quote from Reverend Mary Kara, praise be his eternal name. If you keep on thinking the way you're thinking, you'll keep on getting what you are getting. Mary Kara. And chapter 4 of the book, I'm flipping through assets and liabilities. I believe we must list our assets and liabilities, so I take a chapter of this book, The Repairing, to do so before we talk about putting these into an action plan. I began with this quote from August Wilson Jr. As long as the colored man look to white folks to put the crown on what he say, as long he looks to white folks for approval, then he ain't never going to find out who he is and what he is about. And when he talked about putting on the crown, it reminds you that I just finished and have this book in hand now. I have 4 copies of it. Awakening the Crown. Designing your body from the cells up for power, clarity, and youthful aging. Very proud to add Awakening the Crown to my catalog of critical books. Chapter 4, Assets and Liabilities. Let me just go through our assets instead of listing our liabilities first. I have the habit of countering the litany. Oh, let me give you the litany. As I hear the litany coming forth from the mouths of those who go on and on about the spectrum of black folks' shortcomings, more and more it sounds as if they are praying to the God of our perpetual misery, for which they seem to anticipate a call and response from their audience, signing on to their scarcity-based analysis of our situation. I hope it seems obvious that I am not in agreement with such a dismal outlook. I have come to the habit of countering the litany with as much positive assessment of our status or its potential as my creative analysis can allow. To counter what I perceive as fatalist pessimism, I contend that black folks do. Note the following positive assessments. Point 1, our people have a vast treasury of skills, capacities, assets, and talents. Point 2, we have created a glorious historical record of accomplishment throughout the entirety of human civilization. Point 3, our people consistently demonstrate deep spiritual and moral values, as well as being generous and empathetic. Point 4, we have accumulated a large base of businesses, material assets, wealth-producing industries, real estate, and other hard assets. Point 5, we are courageous, committed, and consistently sacrifice for the benefits of family, community, and other members of the race. Point 6, we are some of the most creative artists in the world of today and of historical record. Point 7, globally, we have a great advantage of sustainable, positive demographics that will drive the whole evolution of planetary civilization for centuries to come. Point 8, African peopled nations on the continent and beyond have dominion over concentrations of natural resources which rival or exceed those under control of other ethnic groups. Point 9, I'm going to quit with this one. Our physical skills, athletic ability, and natural beauty are as great or greater than any other competing groups, and we are proven to be great team players. And there's a couple more, but I'm going to skip over those for expediency. Now I talk about the liabilities. We suffer from the widespread adoption of a foreign culture that does not support and embrace our long history of civilization and spiritual tradition. Skipping number 5, or the second one, our economic dependence upon the same mercantile system which captured our bodies and stole the productive value of our labor centuries ago has today crippled our ability to build intergenerational wealth and prosperity for ourselves. Next point, education and literacy, something which previous generations of our people within this society had great value for, have become devalued in recent decades, resulting in reversing of progress for the generations which followed our historical struggles for social justice, economic, judicial, and educational freedom. Next, a major liability for the great majority of our people within this country is a great disconnect from the very fact that we are African people on this planet. Next point, blacks in the U.S. have a tremendous crippling debt burden, which has cast an ominous shadow over our future development. Next, these are liabilities, and I'm truncating each of these explanations. Problems, perhaps our greatest liability, has resulted from the disruption of traditional family patterns and a pitiful state of relations between Afro-Amer women and men. Next, liability. Our people are too easily distracted by anti-black propaganda, disinformation, irrelevant social trivia, fixation on celebrities, and subjected to provocation by clandestine forces. And lastly, as stated elsewhere in this report, and to which we will return in much greater detail, one of our greatest liabilities is that we do not own enough urban or rural real estate to facilitate our independent, sustainable, and sovereign development. So there it is. I listed a long list of group assets and liabilities in as concise a manner as possible, and I didn't even read the explanations for those within the limited space allotted within this chapter. Perhaps I should have listed the liabilities first, as I feel as if I've slipped back into the litany during the latter part of this chapter. So let's go on to the next chapter, chapter 5. This is a very important chapter. Replicable models and historical precedents. I began with this quote from Malcolm X, Message to the Grassroots. Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. And when you see that you've got problems, all you have to do is examine the historical record method used all over the world by others who have problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. Malcolm X from Message to the Grassroots. I talk about the advance of great African empires. These are breaking these down now. The great advance of great African empires. Any accurate and in-depth analysis of world history cannot overlook the appearance of several African continental empires which left a long and important impact on the evolution of human civilization. Great empires emerged, including ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, Kemet, Tamari, Zimbabwe, Congo, Aksum, Carthage, Songhai, Mali, Ghana, and Ethiopia, Abyssinia are outstanding examples of some 15 powerful African empires which have been identified and examined in great detail. From these empirical centers, some of which rise to prominence at the very beginning of human civilization, we have examples of great achievement in every field of human accomplishment, including invention, mathematics, archaeology, chemistry, biology, technology, leadership governance, the arts, wealth production, agriculture, astronomy, and astrophysics, and much more. Within these empires, particularly outstanding examples of which include the treasures of numerous Nile Valley pharaohs, as well as the single wealthiest man identified in world history, the great Mansa Musa, Sultan of the Mali Empire. Going forward, we talk about post-enslavement Reconstruction period. It was a great period. Post-enslavement Reconstruction, a great period for our people. Within our long historical struggle is this period, Reconstruction, in the aftermath of emancipation from American slavery from 1865 until 1898. There was this era known in the U.S. as the Reconstruction. Amidst the national effort to restore the Union, the formerly enslaved African population, along with its already emancipated brotherhood, was enumerated by the U.S. Census at over 4.88 million of the nation's population of 38.5 million. Skipping forward, reparations, this is all wonderful. We repaired ourselves during the Reconstruction, at which the response was the new Jim Crow. They put apartheid on us. That was called Jim Crow. That was a direct response to our magnificent progress. Our Reconstructor ancestors acquired and developed land at a phenomenal rate, which estimates as much as 15 to 19 million acres of land coming under the control of our members, as much as 6 times the amount of farmland that we own today. Under the protection of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, blacks began to vote, organize for political power, use public accommodations, and create businesses on a great scale. And it then talks about the aftermath of that and the overriding destruction of that Reconstruction. Next example of our historical precedents, race first. Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. They did a wonderful job. I have the book, The Road to Power, which I excerpt from in this book. It's very important. We talk about the UNIA and what they did. Next, we're talking about historical precedents, black towns. Today, the history of black towns, autonomous, self-segregated, and self-governing incorporated communities, provides us with impressive examples of the historical drive by people of African ancestry to determine their own economic reality and govern their collective fate. Today, we are talking about Kuchichagalea villages are the equivalent of black towns. I have a documentary film I want to make on the history of black towns, but we got to go forward today. Today, the next example, Black Wall Street. We're talking about this historical section, the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Beginning before 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, there arose one of the most dynamic and celebrated communities that blacks have known in the Western Hemisphere. This racially segregated section of Tulsa, north of the Frisco Railroad tracks, was variously known as the Greenwood Community, Little Africa, and most often referred to as Black Wall Street. This thriving community, which by 1921 numbered about 10,000 residents, some estimations place the population as high as 15,000 at its peak, became home to a broad spectrum of businesses that catered to virtually every need of its residents. That's the first part of the 6 pillars of empire. No, that's the third part. It did it. They did it, Black Wall Street. And by 1921, building on the commercial benefits of access to the rail line, which dissected Tulsa, along with the Oklahoma oil boom of the 1910s, black-owned businesses thrived, and the dollars spent by its residents circulated within the black community for an extraordinary long period. Next up, example, the civil rights movement was a good movement. We made great gains, and we should not ever be ashamed of those great gains our ancestors made during the civil rights movement. I'm going to skip over that section, but I don't think any one of us should skip over. We at least got to teach our children organizations which served at the forefront of this push for justice, desegregation, and equality included such notable organizations as the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, the Nation of Islam, Congress of Racial Equality, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Rainbow Push, Mississippi Freedom Party, Lowndes County Freedom Organization, also known as the Black Panthers Party, and even extended to black gun clubs, which rose to protect the movement's members from racist terrorism. Then, next chapter up, subchapter, the rise of China to superpower status. In support of our broad focus on replicable models for the repairing, there are numerous reasons to look closely at the example of China's growth and development from 1970s. This should serve as an ideal pathway that would move our group forward toward the achievement of our strategic vision, revitalizing itself from being crushed during the Second World War and its protracted civil war. China's domestic mobilization is itself remarkable for various examples of spectacular transformation. I go through that. This is all very important, and I do cite Howard Francis' book, China's Second Continent, how 1 million migrants are building a new empire in Africa. Well, why are we not that 1 million migrants? Why are they talking about the Chinese success? And the numbers are here. What China is doing in Africa for itself, for China, is pretty remarkable. And Africans appreciate it too. I have for years cited statistics on this relationship between the Chinese investors and developments. In 2013, China invested some $40.7 billion in African infrastructure development, for which it received $200 billion in trade benefits. China spent $40.7 billion and got back $210 billion. Later, I think it's the year 2015, maybe 2016, China spent in Africa some 60 billion, for which they received over $300 billion, a 5-to-1 benefit. 5-to-1 benefit, investment to trade. Singapore, under Lee Kuan Yew, is the next part that I take on. This is very important. Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew, brilliant leader, brilliant. You have to study him. If there's any heroes in Asian history, Lee Kuan Yew, Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and Lee, the current president of China, we have to understand. Lee Kuan Yew, here's a quote from him. "I've spent my life, so much of it, building up this country. There's nothing more that I need to do. At the end of the day, what have I got? A successful Singapore. What have I given up? My life." Lee Kuan Yew, so beautiful. Africa rising, the ascension of Rwanda, Ethiopia, and the Congo. The numbers are there. Look at the GDP growth. We see it. And the wealth is there. We see it. We know it. Africa rising portion of this chapter 5 alone goes on for quite a few pages. Then next I talk about the success of Rastafarianism as a transforming cultural model. And the phenomenal success of Rastafarianism, that's very important. And I talk about that in a previous book. The previous book I'd mentioned was my book, where I talk about the clash of civilizations. What was that book? In High Crimes of Murder, I included this chapter, the phenomenal success of Rastafarianism as a transforming cultural model. And then I talk about rally round the flag, rally round the red, gold, black, and green. Red for the blood that flowed like a river, green for the land of Africa, yellow for the gold that they stole, black for the people they looted from. That is from the David Hines, chief lyricist for the UK-based group Steel Pulse, sang these incredibly inspiring words based upon supporting the Garvey theme, rally round the flag. One more example, the global impact of hip-hop is how what we are creating of recent goes global and then generates huge amounts of organizations. I talk about exponential organizations in chapter 5. This is now getting into business growth, exponential organizations. And lastly, I end with Kujichagulia villages as intentional communities. Summarizing this chapter, replicable models and historical precedents, We've offered up this spectrum of 13 practicable models from which key elements for group serving initiatives and precedents can be extracted. We've shown periods where African people around the world throughout history have proven themselves to be resourceful, disciplined, and highly accomplishing. Core values have been identified from within our distinct ethnic journeys, as well as parallel achievement from other groups as well. The repairing continues. These core values and themes must be constantly revisited as they serve as foundation pillars for that which is our envisioned pathway ahead. By all means, complete knowledge and comprehension of this historical precedent are intended to be both empowering and exciting. Knowing with full confidence of how great have been the accomplishments of countless generations of our ancestors, we can gain an inspiring glimpse of the historical record that our posterity should recognize from us and our generation. We are at a major crossroads. Next, I'm going to go into, I got almost to half of the book. Almost got through the half. Chapter 6, Massive Transformative Purpose. From Booker T. Washington said, success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has achieved, but as the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. Very important. Chapter 7 of this book is entitled Structural Organization. Now we're putting this thing together. Which the thing to do is to get organized. Keep separated and you will be exploited. You will be robbed. You will be killed. Get organized and you will compel the world to respect you. Quoting from Marcus Garvey. Chapter 8 of this book. I hate skipping over this, but we have a mission. Chapter 8 is called Capital Investment. And that's very important. Capital investment is how we're going to make this work. Capital Investments, Chapter 8. W. Du Bois says, now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we will fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. Chapter 8. Chapter 9, Training Leadership for a Sustainable Future. I begin with a quote from myself. As we reach for the stars, we must always remember that we stand upon the shoulders of giants. The future belongs to those who are best prepared to create it today. Chapter 10 of this book is entitled Gaining Consensus with Stakeholders. Now we start to talk about how do we get consensus with everyone who's supposed to be a part of this. And that is, of course, necessary to have a plebiscite. And skipping forward, Chapter 11, Producing for Group Consumption. The best time to plant a fruit tree, was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And this quote from Alice Walker, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Wow. Alice Walker. And Chapter 12, Turning Surplus into Fair Trade. Chapter 13, entitled Functioning Within the New Global Economy. That's all very important. This quote from Joel Kotkin. In the post-Cold War era, where ideology has faded and people seek definitions from the collective past, dispersed groups such as global tribes seem particularly well adapted to succeed within today's progressively more integrated worldwide economic system. And that from the book Tribes, How Race, Religion, and Identity Determine Success in the New Global Economy by Joel Kotkin. I highly recommend read his books, all of his books. He does great books. Chapter 14, Multiple Paths to Security. And I'm going to close right now with this quote. A peaceful world of today and tomorrow should be prioritized as a treasured gift that this current generation would bequeath to its posterity. Forming a society committed to the highest aspirations of humanity, progress, and sustainability must compel our duty of serving as caretakers of this world, toward inheritance for our future generations. Thus, we are in great need to advance appropriate structural institutions that consolidate this inheritance. That quote from your brother, yours truly. And then that takes us, that's chapter 14. Chapter 15 is entitled Passing the Baton. And that's it. Then there is the afterword. I wrote an afterword to the book. Chapter 17, I'm going to not skip over that. The End of Ma'afa, a futurist projection. The End of Ma'afa. The book is called The Repairing. I don't think any one of you could deny the value, the power of this book. But you are doing your best to deny me the pleasure of just hearing from you, of just knowing that you are a part of what we are talking about. So we're going to do better. We're going to do better. I'm putting up the link to this book. Get this book. I see you in the house. Choose Chaos Rain Show. Get this book. And I'm putting up a link there in YouTube for you and everyone else. Thank you for not blocking that, YouTube. Get the book. See all my new books. See all my new books as well at www.consciousrastapress.com. consciousrastapress.com. And I highly encourage you to go to Conscious Rasta Press. It says, I can't post that. See my works at, let me try it again. It keeps rejecting it. So let me just take the .com and separate it. Put this at the end, and I'm going to separate the period from the, don't do that. Oh, it did go up. 3 times the charm. It says, YouTube rejected your comment. This usually means they think it's a spam. Try changing it a bit. Well, I did change it. I didn't change it, but I wanted to. But here's the thing. It says they say. No, it wasn't they. It was a bot, a censor bot. They use censor bots. There's no way in the world any group of people could have examined what I typed in and hit the button on. So the bot is what is censoring me. So let's be clear. When you do things that automatically censor people and crowd them out of the conversation, that's considered to be a breach of a breach of our kind of trust in each other. And the reality is I do not, you do not, we should not trust America for what it does and what it has done to us. That's why we are demanding reparations. It's not a request, but we have got to be put into position to be able to get reparations first. So what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? Who are the we that's going to be acting together for our own best self-interest? Ultimately, that becomes the question of the day. So we encourage each and every one of you to go to your favorite LIB Radio, LIB TV, and Living in Black, and make a decision, make a commitment today, tomorrow, and every day, because we have come a long way, but we got so much further to go until we come to the point where we determine our future. Peace and prosperity. I'll be back tomorrow. We got 2 more books, in fact 4 more books over the next couple of days. You do want to see what we're doing. Check us out at consciousrastapress.com.